There is something she has never said out loud. Not to her husband, not to her closest friend, not even fully to herself. That the closeness she keeps showing up for has started to feel hollow. That she loves him. She does. She knows she does. But somewhere in the middle of the ordinary, the intimacy that was supposed to feel like coming home started feeling like fulfilling an obligation. And she doesn't know how to say that without it sounding like an accusation. So she says nothing, and she keeps showing up. And something essential in her keeps quietly disappearing. If you have ever lain beside your husband in the dark and felt completely alone, if you have ever shown up while some part of you stayed behind a door you didn't know how to open, if you have ever wondered if something is wrong with you because you can't seem to be fully present in your own marriage, this story is for you. Not to shame you, not to fix you, to show you that you are not alone, and that the God who designed you for real connection has not stopped working on your behalf. It was the same as every other night. The kids were in bed, the dishes were done, the house had finally gone quiet, in that particular way it did after 8 p.m., the kind of quiet that was supposed to feel like relief, but lately felt more like an arrival at something neither of them knew how to navigate. They moved through the bedroom in the choreography they had developed over years. His side, her side, the familiar sounds, the familiar motions. Two people who knew each other completely and had somehow stopped seeing each other entirely. She brushed her hair at the mirror. He scrolled through his phone on his side of the bed. Neither of them said much. It was the same as every other night. That was the problem. She didn't know how to explain it. She'd tried to find the words in her head 100 times, while folding laundry, while driving the kids to school, while lying awake in the dark after. She kept coming back to the same inability to name what was wrong without it sounding like an accusation. She loved him. She knew she did. That wasn't the question. The question was why. When he reached for her, something in her went quiet instead of toward him. Why the moments that used to feel like coming home now felt like fulfilling an obligation. Why she kept showing up with her body while some essential part of her stayed behind a door she didn't know how to open. She wasn't withholding on purpose. She just felt empty, like a woman going through the right motions in the wrong direction, and she didn't know how to tell him that without breaking something. He thought she was just tired, and to be fair, she was tired. They both were. That was just the season they were in. 2 kids, 2 jobs, a house that always needed something. Tired was the weather of their lives right now. So when she was quiet, he gave her space. When she seemed distant, he didn't push. When she turned away, he told himself she just needed rest. He was trying to be considerate. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see from where he was standing, was that the space he was giving her felt less like consideration and more like confirmation. Confirmation that he didn't notice, that he wasn't curious about what was happening inside her, that the distance had become so normal to him that he'd stopped registering it as distance at all. He wasn't indifferent. He just didn't know there was a difference between tired and disappearing, and she hadn't told him. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Song of Solomon 7:10. This is what God designed intimacy to feel like. Not obligation, not transaction, Not two people going through the motions in the dark, hoping the other one doesn't notice how far away they really are. Belonging, desire, the profound safety of being someone's. Not in a possessive way, but in the way that says I chose you, and I keep choosing you, and you are not alone in this. God created physical intimacy to be the place where two people are most fully known and most fully safe. When it stops feeling that way, when it starts feeling like a transaction, something important is trying to get a woman's attention, not to shame her, to lead her somewhere honest. She knew the moment was coming. She could feel it in the shift of the evening, the way the house got quiet, the way he put his phone down, the way he moved toward her with that particular combination of tenderness and hope that used to make her heart move toward him and now made something in her brace. She hated that she braced. She hated herself a little for it because he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was being a husband. He was reaching for his wife the way a husband reaches for his wife. And somewhere in the gap between what this was supposed to feel like and what it actually felt like, she was disappearing. She showed up. She always showed up. But there was a version of her that stayed behind every time. A version that was waiting to be reached before she could reach back. A version he didn't know was missing because she had become so practiced at hiding it. She was there. In every way that could be measured, she was there. But there is a kind of absence that has nothing to do with where your body is. A kind of going through the motions that looks like presence and feels like disappearing. A kind of showing up that leaves the most essential parts of you standing just outside the door. She had become fluent in that absence. She knew how to be close without being open, how to be physical without being vulnerable, how to give everything and nothing at the same time in a way so seamless that even she had started to lose track of where the performance ended and the real her began. And the worst part, the part she couldn't say out loud yet, was that she didn't blame him for not noticing because she had worked very hard to make sure he didn't. The husband should fulfill his wife's needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. 1 Corinthians 7:3-4. This scripture is often quoted in one direction, at wives, about duty, about showing up regardless of how you feel. But read it again. The husband should fulfill his wife's needs. God knew that a wife has needs in this space too. Not just physical needs. Needs for connection, for tenderness, for feeling seen and desired as a whole person and not just a body. When intimacy becomes transactional, it's usually because one or both people's deeper needs are going unmet and unspoken. God's design was never transaction. It was mutual. It was knowing and being known. It was two people who actually saw each other. He didn't know. He didn't know that she had spent the entire day carrying things she never brought to him. The worry about the bank account, the exhaustion that went deeper than physical, the feeling of invisible labor that never got acknowledged, the longing to be asked, really asked, how she was doing, and have someone actually wait for the answer. He didn't know that by the time the evening arrived, she had been running on empty for hours, that what she needed before anything else was to be held, without it meaning anything. Just held, just, I see you and you don't have to perform and you don't have to give anything right now. Just here. He didn't know that the physical closeness she kept showing up for felt hollow because the emotional closeness that was supposed to come before it kept getting skipped. He didn't know any of this, not because he didn't care, because she had never told him. And she had never told him because she didn't know if she had the words, or the courage, or the certainty that he would understand. She had rehearsed it 100 times, in the shower, in the car, in the middle of the night when she was lying awake beside him, and the words felt urgent and possible in a way they never did in daylight. She knew what she needed to say. I feel like we have lost something. I feel like when we are close, I am not really there. I feel like you reach for my body, but I need you to reach for me first. I need to feel like your wife, and not just a place you come to. She knew the words. She had held them in her mouth like stones she didn't know how to set down. But every time she came close, every time he looked at her, and she felt the conversation pressing against the inside of her chest, what came out was fine. I'm fine, just tired. It's nothing. Because what if she said it and he didn't understand? What if she said it and he got defensive? What if she said it and he looked at her with that particular blankness that would confirm her worst fear? That what she was feeling was invisible even when she named it out loud. It felt safer to stay quiet, even if staying quiet was slowly hollowing her out. There's a loneliness that is worse than being alone. Being alone has a certain clarity to it. You know what it is. You know why you feel it. You can name it and sit with it and decide what to do about it. But the loneliness of lying beside someone you love and feeling unseen, that is a different kind entirely. A loneliness with no clean edges. A loneliness you can't even fully justify because technically you are not alone. You are right there. So is he. So what is this feeling? She had no language for it that didn't sound like an accusation. She couldn't say, "You make me feel lonely," without it sounding like his fault. She couldn't say, "I feel invisible," without it sounding like he was doing it on purpose. So she said nothing, and the distance inside their closeness grew one quiet night at a time until she couldn't quite remember what it had felt like before. My beloved is mine, and I am his. Song of Solomon, 2:16. Mutual belonging, not one person giving and one person taking, not one person present and one person going through the motions. Mine and his. God's vision for physical intimacy inside marriage was always mutual. Mutual desire, mutual presence, mutual vulnerability. Two people who belonged to each other so completely that being close was the most natural thing in the world. When that mutuality breaks down, when one person is present and the other is somewhere behind a wall they built for protection, God is not indifferent to it. He designed the connection. He grieves its absence. And he is always moving both people toward restoration, even when they can't feel it. Alone in the bathroom at midnight, she asked the question she had been too ashamed to ask anyone else. She sat on the edge of the tub in the dark. The house was quiet. Marcus was asleep, and she just finally asked it. God, is something wrong with me? Because that was the fear underneath everything else. The fear she'd been managing for months by staying busy and staying quiet and showing up and performing and hoping no one, including herself, looked too closely. The fear that she was broken. That other wives didn't feel this way. That there was something fundamentally missing in her that made her unable to be fully present in her own marriage. She sat in the dark and let the question be real. She didn't hear an audible answer, but something shifted in the asking. Something about naming the fear out loud, even just to God, even just in a dark bathroom at midnight, made it smaller. Not gone, but smaller. And she could work with smaller. Nothing is wrong with you. That was the answer she needed. Not a theological lecture. Not a list of things she should be doing differently. Not a reminder about her wifely duties. Nothing is wrong with you. You were designed by God for intimacy that goes all the way down. Not just physical, soul level. The kind of closeness where you are fully known and fully loved at the same time. Where being touched feels like being seen and not just used. Where physical closeness is the overflow of emotional connection and not a substitute for it. Your soul knows the difference. It is always known. What you are feeling is not brokenness. It is your soul refusing to settle for transaction when it was made for communion. That is not a flaw. That is how God wired you. The question is not, what is wrong with me? The question is, what do I actually need, and am I willing to ask for it? Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure. Hebrews 13:4. Honored, not endured, not obligated, not performed. Honored, which means treated as something sacred, something worth protecting, something worth the discomfort of honesty, because what is at stake is too precious to let quietly erode. God placed a high value on what happens between a husband and wife in the privacy of their marriage. Not because the physical act itself is the point, but because what it represents is the point. Two people fully known, fully present, fully chosen. When that becomes hollow, when honor gives way to habit and presence gives way to performance, God invites both people back towards something better, not with shame, with the reminder that this was always supposed to be sacred. And sacred things are worth fighting for. Sitting there in the dark, she finally got honest with herself about what she actually needed, not what she was supposed to need, not what she thought she should be able to manage without, what she actually, specifically, honestly needed. She needed him to ask how she was doing and actually wait for the answer, not the functional check-in on the way to something else. A real question, real curiosity, the kind that said, I want to know what is happening inside you, and I am not going anywhere until you tell me. She needed to be held before she was touched. Just held, no agenda, no destination. The kind of holding that said, you are a person I love, not just a body I want. She needed to feel like his favorite person again, not his obligation, not the woman who manages his household and raises his children and shows up when he reaches for her. His person, the one he chose, the one he keeps choosing. She needed emotional closeness to come before physical closeness, and she needed to be brave enough to say so. In the bedroom, Marcus lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. He didn't have the language for what he was feeling either. Men rarely did, at least not in the way that could be easily spoken. But it was there, a growing sense that something was off, that she was showing up but not really arriving, that there was a version of her he used to have access to that had quietly gone somewhere he couldn't follow. He didn't know what he had done wrong. He had gone over it 100 times and couldn't find it. What he needed, what he would never quite know how to say, was to feel wanted. Not needed, not useful, wanted. To feel like she chose him not out of duty or habit or the life they had built together, but because she actually, specifically wanted him. He needed to know he wasn't failing her. He needed to know the distance wasn't his fault. He needed to know she still saw him. Two people in the same bed, both needing to be seen, neither one knowing the other was waiting. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. Husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. Ephesians 5:25-28. This is the standard God set for a husband's love, not convenient love. Not love when he feels like it. Not love as a transaction. I will love you if you give me what I need. Love like Christ loved the church, which is to say, sacrificial, paying attention, pursuing, not waiting for the other person to meet you halfway, but moving toward them first, loving her as his own body, which means her needs are not separate from his needs. Her flourishing is not in competition with his flourishing. What empties her matters. What she is carrying matters. Her inner world is not a mystery to be ignored, but a person to be known. God gave this instruction because he knew. A wife who is loved this way does not go through the motions. She comes alive. She came back into the bedroom. She had been in the bathroom long enough that he had noticed. He was sitting up now, lamp on, looking at her with that particular expression she recognized, the one that meant he knew something was wrong and didn't know how to ask. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her hands for a moment, then she looked at him. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she told him the truth. Not all of it. Not perfectly. Not in the organized, articulate way she had rehearsed in her head. She told him she loved him. She told him something had felt off for a while. She told him she didn't know how to explain it except that she needed more of him before she could give more of herself. She told him she needed to feel like his person. She told him she was scared he wouldn't understand. She told him she was telling him anyway. She had expected defensiveness. She had braced for the particular kind of hurt that looks like anger, the withdrawal, the justification, the list of everything he had done and why her feelings didn't account for any of it. What she got instead stopped her completely. He was quiet for a moment, a long moment. And then he said, I didn't know, not, you should have told me sooner, not, I don't understand what you want from me, not, I've been trying so hard and nothing is ever enough, just, I didn't know, and then, I'm glad you told me. And then, the three words that undid her entirely, tell me what you need. He didn't have all the answers, he didn't fix it in that moment. He didn't even fully understand it yet, but he stayed. He leaned in. He asked. And sometimes that is the whole thing. Sometimes being asked is the beginning of being healed. It didn't fix everything. She knew that even as it was happening. One conversation, however honest, however tender, doesn't undo months of quiet distance. Doesn't rebuild overnight what eroded one small choice at a time. But something had changed. The wall she had been living behind had a door in it now, and he knew where it was. And she had let him in. They talked for a long time that night. Not about logistics or schedules or the kids, about themselves, about each other, about what they both needed and hadn't been saying. It was uncomfortable in the way that honest things always are. And it was the closest she had felt to him in longer than she could name. Not because anything had been resolved, because they were finally in the same room. The real room. The one underneath all the performing and the managing and the going through the motions. The first step is never the whole journey, but it is the only way the journey begins. Above all, Love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. 1 Peter 4:8. Above all, not love each other when it is convenient, not love each other when you have the energy, not love each other once everything is resolved and the conversation has been had, and you both feel ready. Above all, first, before anything else. Love that goes deep enough to stay present even when presence is hard. Love that covers, not ignores, not pretends, not performs, but covers, holds, stays. This is the love that breaks transaction. This is the love that turns going through the motions back into something real. This is the love that says, I will keep showing up for the real you, even when the real you is hard to reach. Deep love, the kind worth fighting for, the kind they were choosing tonight. She didn't know if everything would be different now. She was too honest with herself to pretend that one conversation, even a good one, even a real one, was a cure. She knew herself well enough to know that the wall would want to come back, that the old patterns would pull, that there would be nights when the motions would be easier than the vulnerability, and she would have to choose all over again. But she knew something else too. She had stopped pretending. For the first time in longer than she could name, she'd let someone into the room behind the room. She'd said the real thing instead of the safe thing. She had trusted him with the part of her she had been most afraid to show. And he had stayed. He had leaned in. He had asked. She lay beside him later, the lamp finally off, the house finally still, and she felt something she had almost forgotten, present, in her own marriage, in her own body, in her own life. Not a transaction, not a performance, just her, just him, just the real thing, fragile and beginning and entirely worth it.